gender-based violence survivor and activist and researcher believes the private sector is the missing link in efforts to combat South Africa's high rates of GBV. A report titled The Costly Impact of GBV highlights the need for the private sector to address the reality of GBV in the workplace as it formulates company policy and structures of governance. Now, to tell us more about the report, we're now joined via Zoom by Prof Corné Davis, a senior lecturer in strategic communication at the University of Johannesburg. Prof, a warm welcome to you and thank you so very much for joining us here on SABC News.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're most welcome. I mean, you talk about the fact that the report talks about the fact that the missing link in efforts to combat South Africa's high rates of GBV is the private sector. Why the private sector? I mean, one would think that the private sector's main aim is, of course, profit. So they wouldn't necessarily be concerned about GBV, but why should they be?
Well, you know, there's been a remarkable shift in business thinking and speaking over the recent years. And the problem has been that gender-based violence has not been positioned within an organizational framework before. So if you look at corporate social responsibility, corporate governance, employee well-being, stakeholder engagement, the topic doesn't feature there yet.
Yeah.
And for that reason, I believe it's not been conceptualized as a business problem because from the academic side, there's not been enough attention paid from a multidisciplinary perspective. It has been positioned in the field of public health mostly and has been seen as a government concern, not so much as a business concern. And I think it's time that academics stepped up and positioned it there so that we could see that it's an issue that affects employees and hence affects the private sector as well as all sectors in society.
What sort of involvement are we looking for from the private sector? I mean, what do we want the private sector to do when it comes to dealing with issues around GBV?
Well, if you think about employees being reached predominantly in their place of work, there's an opportunity to educate them and inform them. There's an opportunity to address people's needs in terms of providing information, you know. So there's a lot of reasons for this to be happening everywhere and in all environments. And this is what we try to establish in our research. Our purpose was to find out where the public sector positioned themselves, considering that the National Strategic Plan called on the private sector to address it.
We understand, of course, that this report will be released on Thursday. Talk to us about how this research was conducted and if there are any findings, you know, what exactly you have found. Well,
we obviously want to keep most of our findings for Thursday, but the research came about because we partnered with Shared Value Africa Initiative. I, as an academic, battled to find platforms to publish papers on gender-based violence from the perspective of strategic communication. And then I came across Tiki Barnard from Shared Value Africa Initiative, and we started talking about this research. We then also had conversations with KPMG, and following that, conversations with University of Sweden, Prof Gustav Dalal, who's visiting us right now. He will be at the launch. And we decided, but you know, that it's time to speak from different platforms and to work together. The relationship between academics and industry is fundamentally important. And we decided, well, following that there was a report published in 2014, there's not been a report since, that it was a good time to do this research and to also assess what employees' perceptions were about gender-based violence, what they knew, what they thought had to be done. So that's also another important aspect of the research that we will be sharing. And I think that is significant for South Africans to know, given that the topic is stigmatized and that people don't want to speak about it, that we are now hearing employees' voices as well as CEOs and executives' voices about what their thoughts are, so that we can start coming together and finding real
Last year, private companies pledged at least 70 million rand to launch a gender-based violence response fund. I mean, some could criticize them and say, well, they're throwing money at the problem. But, we've been told that when dealing with GBV, you do what you can with what you have. And if the private sector says, well, what we can do is throw money at the problem, surely there's something that can be done with that money. And isn't that, a start?
It is a start. And we will be happy to share with you this week that there is actually a willingness to do a lot more, that there's a lot more collaboration coming forward, and that I think we've got a very positive outlook. I'm very excited about the work that is coming.
Yeah, I know you don't want to talk too much about the reports and what your findings are, and you're waiting for a Thursday to do so. But I'd like to talk about the policy frameworks to address gender-based violence in the workplace. I mean, if you speak to many HR departments, they'd say, we do have policies in place. We have strict policies in place that deal with issues relating to gender-based violence, and it's specifically to workplace gender-based violence. What would you then say to that?
I must say to you, to be honest, at this stage, the work that has been done to date in the workplace is predominantly focused on sexual harassment. As a workplace concern, remember we had the hashtag #MeToo and about sexual violence taking place in the workplace, and most companies have policies like that. What we were saying is that if you look at a country such as Canada, for example, where addressing gender-based violence has become part of the Occupational Health and Safety Act through the efforts of universities who intervened and participated in research. So that's more the kind of bigger outcome, that it's not dealing with the symptoms, but looking at the whole societal issue as well, considering that healthy organizations can only exist in healthy societies. If you look at where South Africa is at the World Happiness Index, number 101 on the World Happiness Index. If you look at South African Depression and Anxiety Group, of the statistics of how depressed and anxious and medicated South Africans are. If you look at our divorce rate and you look at, for example, our high levels of alcohol consumption, these are fundamental problems. And it's time to say, but we can't have on the surface solutions for deeply rooted problems. We need to start finding things that work and recognize that throwing money at just anything it's never going to be good enough. It's a start. Money can make things happen. For example, places of safety for women, which is still sadly lacking in South Africa.
Yeah.
Yes, there's definitely money needed, but there's more to it than that. We're wanting to look at a healthy society.
All right, Corné, thanks very much for your time, Prof. We appreciate it.
You are welcome.
All right, that is Professor Corné Davis, Senior Lecturer in Strategic Communication at the University of Johannesburg.